I'm a 38-year-old man, happily married to a 41-year-old woman for about 15 years. We have 2 great kids in elementary school. Initially, our relationship was smooth and problem-free, but things took a turn for the worse after we got married. Despite our efforts to fix things, we couldn't maintain stability. I constantly tried to meet her ever-changing expectations, and it felt like as soon as I solved one problem, another one emerged. This cycle was exhausting, making me feel tired and disappointed. A few weeks ago, I made the tough choice to move out of our house. In December, she confided in me that she considered herself frigid and had no interest in being close. Even though I had stopped initiating closeness a few years ago, she claimed it was unique to her. We sought therapy to address our closeness issues, discovering her past trauma. We spent several years in therapy, even seeking specialized help from another therapist. Despite our best efforts, our situation deteriorated, and for the last 7 years, we've had no bed life. I've battled mild depression throughout my life and eventually needed medication to cope. The combination of these meds and my kids prevented me from breaking down. In the new year, I noticed restlessness in my wife. She started reconnecting with old friends in different states, some of whom were going through divorces. After spending time with them, she confessed she wanted a divorce. The pain from our relationship struggles became unbearable. This time, it felt like I was mourning the loss of our entire family. As I dealt with my emotions, I began to reorganize my life whenever I could. I'm currently in the process of getting things in order. She's currently on a work break, and almost every day when I come home with the kids, she's absent. She retreats to our bedroom, and at times, her dissatisfaction with the kids or me has led me to take them to their grandparents to protect them from the tense atmosphere at home. During these tough times, I only reached out to my brother and his wife for support. Given my mother's ongoing battle with cancer, I didn't want to burden them further, but one weekend, things changed. During a rare free moment, my wife chose to spend time with her old friends. Feeling out of place, I asked my brother for a conversation. During our talk, he mentioned that his wife wanted to discuss something important, and his words shocked me. He suggested, "Maybe you should consider not delaying the divorce and talk to our parents." He revealed that a few years ago, they had an affair. During a family holiday, a conversation between my wife and my brother's wife took an unexpected turn. My wife said, "If we ever get divorced, I'll take everything he has from him." My heart raced, and I had a panic attack, the first since my teenage years. Her statements were so out of character that I couldn't believe she was serious. I turned to my brother for answers, desperate to know if it was a joke. His wife confirmed that my wife was serious. She then shared this revelation with my parents, leading me to call them. During that call, my emotions were in turmoil. I cried, felt awkward, and was deeply hurt. I felt sorry for burdening them, especially considering their own challenges. During the conversation, my mother disclosed that my wife had confided in her years ago. It turned out my wife was jealous of one of my cousins who had recently divorced. She admired their courage, but my mother chose not to tell me, thinking it didn't matter. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. A clearer image of my wife began to form in my mind. I'd always had suspicions, but whenever I voiced them, she brushed them off and accused me of being paranoid and having trust issues. She convinced me she wasn't capable of such actions, making me doubt my intuition. Over time, I continued to gather information about our financial responsibilities, taxes, and other important matters. My wife's behavior became increasingly erratic, and it seemed like she was distancing herself from our relationship. She frequently sought opportunities to be away from our home and had a strong aversion to it. Eventually, she found comfort in living with her friend's elderly mother, who only asked for minimal rent. It turned out this woman craved companionship and needed assistance with household chores. A few weeks ago, after a night out with friends, we sat down with the children to have an open conversation about the situation. One of our kids, visibly upset, sought comfort in hugging their mother tightly, while another child reacted more calmly. But the emotions of the third child ran high. Upon learning that she would take the family dog with her in less than a week, she decided to move out earlier than planned. My early morning hospital shifts made it challenging for her to come home at 2 a.m. to look after the kids. The day finally came when she moved out as scheduled, and my parents picked up the children. Unfortunately, She left without even hugging the kids goodbye. Less than a week after her departure, I mustered the courage to consult a lawyer and initiate the legal process. Surprisingly, she cooperated with the lawyer and promptly signed all the required documents to move the case forward. However, during the time the children were in my care, she made no effort to contact them. Her interactions with them were limited, and according to the kids, she often preferred exercising and burying herself in her phone without genuine interest in their lives. Regrettably, it seems my wife lacks a genuine interest in our children's lives, except for maintaining her appearance. I won't delve into further details. After her departure, I gradually adapted to the situation and strived to provide a stable environment for our children. During her visits, I even supplied food when she faced financial difficulties and had nothing to eat. I also offered financial help a couple of times when she was in a tight spot. In an attempt to maintain civility, I decided to provide her with some financial assistance, considering it a contribution to our shared account, which we hadn't yet divided. Some may criticize this decision as foolish, but I believe it fosters a better environment and contributes to our children's well-being. That's what I tell myself, and it's not entirely untrue. The culmination of all these issues occurred at the end of last week when she took the children away for a few days, coinciding with one of my long shifts. Upon returning home from work that day, I consciously used the time without my children to engage in various hobbies and activities I enjoy, including working on music. I set up my computer and started connecting everything. Unfortunately, annoying messages about synchronization issues with my wife's iCloud account kept popping up on the screen. Disappointed, I attempted to resolve the problem. While navigating the photos on my computer, I stumbled upon something unexpected. If you think you know what happened next, your assumptions are correct. Despite her attempts to clean the computer before leaving, some remnants went unnoticed. To my surprise, I found a large number of photos and videos, some of which were explicit, and revealed her infidelity with a mutual friend. This discovery was devastating, as it felt like I had spent the last 15 years of my life in a marriage built on a false illusion. It shattered the image she had crafted over the years. The day after uncovering these clues, she brought the children back home, and I made an effort to remain composed. I chose not to confront her about what I had found, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of our children. There are other aspects of this story that I may share in the future. A part of me appreciates that I did everything I could to salvage our relationship, because without this revelation, I might have remained oblivious to the truth. I wonder if I would have regretted not putting in more effort. However, another part of me underscores the importance of trusting your intuition. Sometimes, when something doesn't feel right, it's crucial not to let others convince you otherwise. I'm not suggesting that one's intuition is always accurate, but it shouldn't be dismissed. In any case, to provide more context, let me fill in some gaps. Firstly, the person she cheated with isn't married. He's her ex-boyfriend. I discovered a message she sent to him during our therapy sessions, in which she vividly described a dream of engaging in an act with her ex-boyfriend. She concluded the message by advising him not to disclose it to me, claiming I'd react strongly. When I confronted her about this, she brushed off my concerns, saying I was overreacting, and even suggested that our therapist shared the same view. Interestingly, it turned out that this therapist was the same one she had seen during her teenage and early 20s. In hindsight, I question why I ever thought this therapist was the right choice. I want to stress the importance of honesty and open communication. Let me clarify that I have no intentions of sharing any of her photos. I see them as undeniable evidence of her unfaithfulness, and yes, they are time-stamped. I plan to provide all this information to my lawyer. Since the start of January, I've diligently documented each day, carefully recording the time and details of her actions and interactions with the children. Now that she's moved into her own place, I won't be able to videotape these interactions anymore. I considered the option of audio recording during our personal conversations, and my lawyer supported this idea. Currently, it appears that she's deeply in love with someone else and is looking forward to a divorce, especially because she's entitled to half of my $401k. As for our property, before she moved out, we managed to divide everything amicably. Truth be told, we didn't have much property to split because we sold our house at the end of last year. After the sale, my wife and I decided to move into my parents' old house, which is in a trust and doesn't belong to either of us. We evenly divided the money we received from the house sale between us. Unfortunately, my wife managed to spend her share of approximately $14,000 in less than 2 months, leaving very little behind. Some of this money went towards supporting her lover, as indicated by a $100 bill I have. There may be other evidence of similar expenses. Initially, we agreed on a 50-50 custody arrangement for the children, with neither of us paying alimony or child support. However, after this situation came to light, my lawyer mentioned that the original agreement might not hold much legal weight. He offered to formalize it if I wanted, but at the time, I told him not to worry since no information about it had surfaced. About a week later, I brought up the topic of revising the custody agreement with my wife. I suggested adjusting it to a 60-40 split in my favor. Surprisingly, when I proposed that she become the primary guardian, she agreed without any resistance. I suspect her current focus on her own life has driven her to create the image of a responsible mother. Her own mother often engages in conversations with her, believing she's fulfilling her parental duties, which only adds to my wife's stress. Yesterday, I received an unexpected phone call from her. This was unusual since she typically communicates via text messages. I had the impression she wanted to discuss the person she's dating, but her actual intentions surprised me. During the call, she tearfully shared her struggles with physical therapy due to a toe injury she sustained at work last year. She expressed frustration with the slow progress in treatment and difficulty in moving her toe correctly. Furthermore, she mentioned that she's not allowed to drive for health reasons. During our conversation, she told me she's heavily involved in physical exercises, which brought a faint smile to my face for the first time since I found the incriminating photos and videos. She also spoke of financial difficulties and doubts about selling the house where she now lives with someone else. Moreover, she expressed concerns about how she'll manage her time with the children upon returning to work, despite having taken them with her for part-time weekends over the last 2 weeks. She mentioned that she had many plans for the upcoming weekend in the city. During the conversation, it became evident that she was finding it challenging to spend consistent time with the children, and she couldn't see them as often as she'd like. In response, I tried to remain accommodating, hoping we could work together to establish a daily routine that would allow her regular access to the children. However, she mentioned casually that her initial plan to move closer to us might not be feasible due to potential high costs. She might have to move even farther away, around 15 miles. In response to her uncertain life situation, I reassured her that, for the children's sake, we'd find a way to resolve the issue. But to my surprise, she seemed open to this possibility. She casually brought up the idea of moving across the border to a neighboring state to secure a higher income despite increased living costs. This decision would mean we'd be quite far apart, about 70-90 miles, making it likely that she'd see the children even less often. I couldn't help but feel disheartened, as I could hardly imagine how such a significant move would align with the children's schedule and well-being. As I watched the situation unfold and considered our shared responsibilities, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was becoming less interested in our children, almost as if she were trying to shift her parental duties onto me. The thought that she wanted to move so far away from the children we brought into this world troubled me deeply. After making the decision to unravel the situation, I embarked on an investigation to uncover more pieces of the puzzle. In the course of this investigation, I delved into her lover's social media account and stumbled upon explicit evidence about her partner. This revelation was a harsh reality for her. It became evident that she was willing to forsake her own children to be closer to her lover. Her choice to relocate was primarily motivated by the opportunity to be with her lover, leading her to consider abandoning our children and parental responsibilities, leaving me as the sole caregiver. Simultaneously, she aimed to keep up the appearance of a responsible mother in front of family and friends. I couldn't fathom how one could upend their entire life and schedule based on their lover's whims. I was devastated, filled with heartache and anger. I couldn't let her shirk her responsibilities as a parent. Observing her attempt to maintain the facade of a caring mother while planning to desert our family, I took decisive action. I reached out to my lawyer and filed a request to terminate her parental rights. When she called to chastise me for my actions, I disclosed the truth to her. Her decision to leave the family was solely influenced by her affair partner. I implored her to consider transferring custody of the children to me. During our conversation, it seemed like she might agree, but her stance quickly changed. When I mentioned that I wouldn't hide the truth, she reacted with anger and surprise. She flatly refused to relinquish her parental rights, stubbornly upholding the facade of motherhood, despite her actions suggesting otherwise. It was evident that she cared more about fulfilling her own desires than the welfare of our children. Disappointment and determination welled up within me, driving me to reveal the truth to her family. I believed it was necessary for them to understand the kind of person she had become. Despite the painful nature of this step, I deemed it essential for securing my children's future. Upon learning of my actions, she grew furious and persistently contested my decision. She made it clear that she intended to proceed with her move and had no intention of surrendering her maternal rights. She proposed that we co-parent from a considerable distance. In response, she accused me of being vindictive and manipulative, but I chose not to engage in an argument with her. Instead, I sought legal assistance and discussed alimony with my father. When she realized that receiving alimony would require her to financially contribute to our children's support, something she couldn't afford, the situation shifted. Her partner didn't appear willing to assume that responsibility either. Suddenly, she became concerned about preserving her reputation. Overburdened with the responsibilities of a responsible parent, she couldn't bear the financial weight of alimony and feared further damage to her image. In the end, she abandoned her relocation plans and reluctantly consented to continue shared custody of our children. This victory was hard-won and rooted in my unwavering principles. Despite knowing that she prioritized her lover over our children, I refused to compromise their well-being for her sake. I did everything in my power to ensure the mother of my children remained a part of their upbringing and lives. Naturally, her lover didn't want these complications, and he soon vanished from my ex-wife's life. Afterward, she made active attempts to seduce me and rekindle a relationship to return to our lives with the children. However, I firmly conveyed that I had no interest in someone as dishonest and fickle as her. End of the story. I am a 50-year-old nurse, working diligently at a busy hospital. Currently, I find myself at a crucial moment in life. In front of me, there's a green piece of paper with my name and signature, and it's a divorce document. As I look at it, I let out a heavy sigh. Let me introduce you to my wife, Mary, who happens to be 3 years younger than me. Our story started 5 years ago when I got married at the age of 45. We met at work, where Mary was a medical assistant. Both of us were so focused on our careers that finding a life partner wasn't something we'd thought much about. But fate had other plans, and we started dating, which eventually led to marriage. Considering our ages, we took things slow before deciding to get married. After a few years of dating, we tied the knot later in life, with me at 45 and Mary at 42. We decided not to have children and dedicated our years to each other. Little did we know that our ideal vision of marriage would soon be tested. Reality had different plans for us. Our demanding jobs led to conflicting schedules, especially because of my night shifts. Health issues, especially for Mary, became a part of our lives. Menopause arrived, bringing with it a range of challenges like constant irritability, fatigue, mood swings, and emotional turmoil. Although I struggled to fully understand what she was going through, it was clear that Mary was in pain. Our lives became filled with minor disputes, and our relationship was overshadowed by exhaustion and dissatisfaction. Over 5 years, our affection had turned into indifference. I began to question the purpose of our relationship. Every day felt like a battleground with arguments and bitter exchanges. Was this the life we were meant to live? My thoughts were interrupted when Mary returned home. She greeted me apathetically as she entered, hiding the divorce papers under the table. I waited for her in the living room, and when she appeared, her mood matched the cold atmosphere. Even a simple hi felt like a reminder of the love that had faded away. Summoning my courage, I brought up the topic of divorce. Mary's reaction was unexpectedly calm. She showed no surprise or sorrow. Her composed demeanor reflected acceptance. Her response matched the frigid state of our relationship. With few words exchanged, I handed her the divorce papers, and she signed them without hesitation. Tomorrow, I plan to submit these papers to City Hall, marking the end of a 5-year chapter in our lives. At this turning point, I reflect on the journey I embarked on: a late marriage born from work, a union that showed promise but succumbed to its challenges. As I stand on the edge of change, I think about the choices that brought us here. Sometimes life's complexities unravel even the strongest bonds, leaving behind memories of what was and what might have been. "I'll prepare dinner one last time," Mary said, her voice filling the kitchen as she started cooking. Even after signing the divorce papers, Mary's demeanor remained unchanged. The routine continued. She ate her dinner and went to bed early. It felt strangely surreal how nothing seemed different on the surface, but beneath it, change had indeed occurred. I realized this just before bedtime. Our bedroom looked the same, but something had shifted. We slept in separate beds, a practice that had become unfamiliar over time. Sharing a bed had become a rarity, replaced by the quiet separation of separate sleeping arrangements. As I struggled with sleeplessness, Mary initiated a conversation. The distance between us had limited meaningful exchanges, but tonight was an exception. We reminisced about our early days, laughing as we recalled a time when Mary used to sneak into my bed, complaining about the cold, her playful attempts to get my attention. In our prime, subtle flirtations were common, though age had tamed those impulses. Tonight, Mary's choice of clothing seemed reminiscent of those days. Her skimpy pajamas brought back memories. She caught my gaze and expressed her desire with a knowing smile. "May I join you in bed? It's chilly," she requested, her words hanging in the air. I hesitated briefly, but welcomed her into the sheets. We acknowledged the passage of time, no longer the young lovers of the past, now on the brink of parting ways. With a shared understanding, we decided to make this night a poignant memory. Mary's presence next to me brought back bittersweet memories. Over the years, life had changed her, a testament to the challenges she had faced. It wasn't about rekindling the marriage, but a silent wish to see her content. Amid these thoughts, we exchanged a simple good night. Sleep soon overtook us, ending the day. The next morning came, and Mary was gone. Her things had disappeared from our room, leaving no sign of her. However, there was a note in the living room, a brief message thanking me and urging me to take care of myself. That's all it said, a heartfelt farewell. Months passed, and life took a new direction. A change in jobs led me to a busy hospital, providing a fresh start that distanced me from the memories of a failed marriage. The divorce had created discomfort at work, and the need for financial stability influenced my choices. Despite being single, my dedication to work remained unchanged. The idea of marriage was distant. For now, I found comfort in the absence of workplace romances, a chapter firmly closed. "Mr. Jones, a new patient arrived some time ago. My boss called me over, and as I looked through the patient's paperwork, I realized that this person was battling cancer. They had been getting treatment at another hospital as an outpatient, but now they were being admitted for chemotherapy. Surprisingly, this patient had the same name as my ex-wife, Mary, and even more astonishing, their last name matched Mary's maiden name. Feeling a strange connection, I went to greet her while checking her temperature. "Excuse me, it's time for your temperature check," I said as I entered the private room. The patient, who had been looking out of the window, turned to face me. To my amazement, it was Mary, the woman I had once been married to. Her face was pale, cheeks sunken, and she looked incredibly thin, but there was no doubt it was her. In a faint but unmistakable voice, I heard Mary's familiar tone. She was also surprised to see me, but my surprise was even greater. The medical chart showed the seriousness of her cancer. It was more than just some weight loss or low energy. Looking at her drastically changed condition, it was clear she was in critical condition. The chart also indicated that her cancer had been diagnosed just before we divorced. On the day I brought up the divorce, Mary must have known about her illness. "Why didn't you tell me about the cancer?" I blurted out, even though I knew I didn't have the right to know anymore. Mary responded, explaining that she thought our marriage was already falling apart, with or without the cancer. She blamed herself for the deterioration, and realized she couldn't hold me back, especially given her limited time. Listening to her explanation, regret washed over me. Why hadn't we communicated better? Why hadn't I noticed her changes? I had let her go through her illness alone, adding to her pain. Despite her health struggles, she had agreed to the divorce. Amid my self-blame and despair, Mary scolded me, saying, "You're healthier than I am, so don't hang your head so low." She reminded me of the times she had supported me during my moments of self-doubt. Now, I was facing the consequences of not repaying her kindness. The woman who had been my support for 5 years was right in front of me. I looked at Mary with newfound determination. I knew I didn't have the right to say this, but I wanted to take care of her until the end. I bowed my head, and in response, Mary gently smacked me on the head, with a mix of exasperation and joy on her face. With persistence, I wore down her reluctance, and she finally agreed with an expression that combined both emotions. From that moment on, I took care of Mary. Despite her parents visiting, it was clear that she needed additional care and support. While I had worried that her family might not accept me, they did. Understanding the complexities of the situation, with Mary's family living far away, it fell on me to tend to her daily needs. In the following months, I visited Mary's hospital room without fail, regardless of my work schedule. I was there before work, after work, during days off, and before night shifts. Mary's chemotherapy treatment began, and although I had cared for numerous patients professionally, the experience was entirely different when it was a family member. Treating a stranger versus treating family brought forth a tidal wave of emotions. My intention was to provide professional support, but inevitably, my heart became deeply involved in her journey. I was overwhelmed by despair. Mary had immediately started treatment after our divorce, yet it appeared ineffective against the metastasized cancer. The harsh reality of cancer treatment, painful and grueling, was something she faced alone. I deeply wished I could have been there for her, but helplessness held me captive in the face of adversity. Mary's spirit remained unbroken. She fought her battle with courage, even managing to smile despite the misery. Her resilience, however, painfully, reminded me of my own limitations. There was little I could do to alleviate her suffering. Then, a cruel twist. Mary's treatment had to be halted. Due to her weakened state, aggressive measures were no longer feasible, and we had to embrace this heart-wrenching reality. Mary accepted it with grace, whispering her intent to live her remaining days to the fullest. I became her pillar of support, sharing laughter over anecdotes, taking walks on better days, and even attempting crafts together. Although my attempts were often clumsy, Mary's laughter at my awkward creations brought us immense joy, and for a while these simple pleasures sufficed. Amid these tender moments, the cancer persisted, taking a relentless toll on her. Our days of joy were fleeting as her condition deteriorated rapidly. Sleepless nights were plagued by pain, and tears streamed down more frequently, often hidden from my view. Painkillers helped ease her distress, but gradually vitality waned, and her laughter became rare. I could only offer words of encouragement, but Mary valued them deeply. "Thank you for always being there," she expressed, acknowledging the significance of my presence. My daily visits gave her the strength to continue, a sentiment she openly shared. Her immobility drew us closer, and yet we remained strangers in the eyes of the world due to our past choices. I had wanted it that way, but now regret knotted me. In an attempt to convey my rekindled feelings, I made a heartfelt proposal to Mary in that quiet hospital room. "Will you marry me?" I finally uttered. Mary's response, light-hearted and affectionate, expressed her delight despite her refusal. While I was met with a resounding rejection, I couldn't give up. I presented her with a marriage certificate, my signature already adorning it. Her joy at the gesture was palpable, a testament to the connection we had forged. A few days later, Mary passed away, exceeding her expected time. For a month, she fought bravely with unwavering determination. While grieving her loss and preparing for her funeral, I realized she had lived an extra month. Because of our strong connection, the funeral plans came together quickly. Even though we weren't legally married, Mary's parents insisted that I sit with them in the family section. Initially hesitant, I accepted and felt honored by their gesture. The funeral proceeded, and eventually we made our way to the gravesite. Surprisingly, I didn't shed tears. I had already cried while taking care of Mary. As we waited for the final part of the burial, I sat on a bench, staring blankly at the sky. Mary was no longer in this world, leaving a void in my heart. Unexpectedly, Mary's mother noticed me. She softly said, "Ken, you were here." Her red, swollen eyes revealed the depth of our shared grief. Her sorrow was undoubtedly deeper than mine, as she had lost her daughter. She gave me a letter that Mary had intended to receive on the day of her funeral. With a trembling heart, I received the letter and a diary that Mary had left behind. Opening the diary, I found it to be as simple and genuine as Mary herself. It began with short notes about everyday things but became more detailed when we met. It chronicled our dates, my job evaluations, our conversations, and even the ordinary mishaps of our life together. The entries shifted from notes about me to reflections on her own feelings. As she approached menopause, her tone changed. She expressed frustrations and regrets, especially about how she had directed her frustrations at me. She regretted her inability to have productive conversations and acknowledged my growing emotional distance. The last pages of the diary were filled with a heavy sense of remorse, a recurring theme day after day. One specific date in the diary caught my attention. It was a month before our divorce, the day she learned of her cancer diagnosis. She had deliberately hidden her emotions from me, keeping a tough exterior. A particular entry stood out, the day I had proposed divorce. Her words painted a picture of her happiness as she reminisced about our earlier, happier times. But then her entry abruptly ended, leaving me with the weight of her unspoken thoughts. I hadn't realized how deeply she had been thinking about me. With a heart full of emotion, I turned to the letter. She expressed disbelief at seeing me again in a new hospital, and her hesitation to burden me with her situation. However, my offer to care for her had deeply moved her. She apologized for not being able to refuse and nearly breaking down emotionally. When I proposed again, her regrets had faded, and she faced her imminent departure with acceptance. She asked me not to grieve for her and urged me to wait until old age to reunite in heaven. Her final wish was clear that if my feelings remained unchanged, we would marry again in the afterlife. The letter ended with the promise to keep our marriage certificate. As I read, tears flowed uncontrollably. Mary's emotions poured from these pages, and I was touched by the depth of her feelings. Mary's parents' gesture of allowing me to sit with the family at the funeral aligned with Mary's wishes. For a while I openly wept with swollen eyes, yet by the grave I remembered her wish for me not to cry. So I composed myself and bid her farewell with a smile. Mary rested peacefully in the casket, holding our marriage certificate. Her expression was calm, and her grasp on the document was strong. Her signature, below mine, marked a bond that had endured trials and sorrow.